Hi, Sam. You made a presentation on a possible agreement between Ukraine, Russia, maybe Western countries, US, so on. What kind of agreement are you talking about? Is it a military, economic, political? What kind of issues? Only Donbass or other issues?
So I think for an agreement to be sustainable, it would have to be comprehensive. And clearly there are a lot of issues in play right now. It's not just the Donbass, it's not just Crimea, it's also about Ukraine's geoeconomic and geopolitical future. It's about, Russia's anxieties about NATO. It's about a number of different things. So there have to be, I think, a lot of issues on the table to really have a sustainable agreement. So it's not just the agreement we would all want ideally, it's what all parties could possibly agree to at the end.
In your presentation, you said that Russia does not need an agreement. Ukraine needs an agreement.
Yeah.
What about Western country? EU needs an agreement?
Well, I was making a narrow point that I think to prevent a worst case outcome, which I think is much of what Russia is doing right now, it doesn't need a settlement to do that. It can do that using the tools that it has, namely its economic influence in Ukraine and the conflict in Donbass. It's a lever that can be turned up and on when they want. So they don't need an agreement that actually creates a stable settlement in order to achieve their objectives. I think they would prefer one, but they don't have to have one, because it's much cheaper to have an agreement than not to have an agreement, right? The alternative means sustaining the separatists, means perhaps taking on more sanctions, et cetera, et cetera. So whether I believe that it is in the EU and the US interest to have peace in Europe, so therefore I would say yes, both sides are interested in it. I think Ukraine, first and foremost, stands to suffer without such an agreement being in place. So therefore it's most directly in Ukraine's interests.
You are doing research on those strategic issues. What about personal feelings, personal involvement as a citizen? How did you react to what happened those last months?
So it's been very difficult. People often say to me, "Oh, you must be so happy now because people are paying attention to your issues, and you can go on TV." And I take no pleasure to explain to them that having lived in both Russia and Ukraine for a significant time in my life, I have fondness for both countries and for the people who live in both places, and this is such a horrible tragedy, I think, for both countries, that taking any pleasure in it really feels wrong. So I don't, and it's really profoundly depressing when you think about it on a personal level as to what's happened, and so it's been difficult, frankly.
You have been in Russia, you have been in Ukraine. That helps you to be objective on the subject, or
maybe,
not?
I don't know. I think perhaps if I lack objectivity, it's that I probably try to make these issues more central to the US agenda than they otherwise might be if I were to take the world as a whole and position this crisis within other US priorities. Probably wouldn't be talking about it as much. But maybe perhaps my own bias comes from caring about this part of the world and therefore putting it higher on the agenda, or trying to at least.
Your last time in Ukraine, when it was?
July.
July. What was your impression?
So I came, it was the week after Kramatorsk and Slavyansk had fallen to the Ukrainian forces, and the Ukrainian forces were on the offensive. It was the week before MH17. At that point, I think there was something that Khrushchev might have called a little bit of dizziness from success setting in, and that got, I think, more pronounced as time went on in July and into mid to late August, whereby I often came away from the meetings that I had thinking that there was a view taking hold that Ukraine could resolve this militarily. And I think that attempt was ultimately made, and it didn't work out very well.
Thank you much.
Sure.